all, welcome to episode 34, would you believe, of Property Avenue WA, your avenue to matters property in West Australia. I'm Tony Viner, he's Oscar D'Souza, TV and OD, and we just like talking about property in WA. The focus is all about WA. But of course, as we always say, if you are listening, if you are watching, please join us and please ask some questions. We really enjoy the opportunity. That's what it's about, is being able to discover the answers for you. Over the journey, we've had a variety of guests, we've had a variety of topics, we've had a whole heap of questions coming through. And you know what I do? During the week I've been a little bit of a busy boy and I'm not as well prepared as I'd like. But
really?
I saw an article in the paper and I thought, I'm sure we discussed that a week or so ago. So I think we're a leader. We're a leader of our information.
Tell me.
But mate, how are you?
Yeah, mate, I'm really good. Yeah, even though we might be a little bit unprepared today, as you say, I reckon we can probably get a few things together and keep the show interesting. But just going back to that article that you mentioned, tell me, what did you read that that we touched on the week before?
Well, it touched on the fact about the lending and the 1 million. You know how we had Dean Stonehouse on last week, and we were talking about the lending, etc. So there was an article then a couple of days ago exactly about that, which was quite interesting. It was something that we were only talking about a week to 10 days ago. So it's always intriguing as to those figures. And I know, and it was. I'll actually tell you, it was. There was another article I read as well, which was telling us about Australia's cheapest block, less than the price of a top-end TV. Now, it was 45 minutes away from Mildura, but obviously don't when they talk about Australia, they don't take into consideration WA, because I can tell you the number of properties we've done for 3,000, 5,000, 7,000 blocks of land in Western Australia is quite regular, especially in up in the Midwest and areas like that, even in the central wheatbelt area. So it's not uncommon, but it just highlights what we talk about WA, Property Avenue WA. You read these articles and you go, cheapest block. Well, most people go, oh, that's cheap. But what we don't realise is, that's maybe on the East Coast, but on the WA coast, there are opportunities like that, and they've been around for a long time. So, it's interesting.
In fairness, though, and this is something that I'm definitely guilty of as well, because we just do what we do day to day in real estate, and we've been doing it for so many years now. It kind of is our life, and so the things that we might think about that to other people, didn't you realise that was the case, or that's the way that it's always been? Of course they wouldn't, because they're not doing this stuff day to day. And just when you were talking about cheap blocks of land through, the Midwest and the Gascoyne, it takes me back to valuation days. Might be as far as 10 years ago when I was doing valuations of vacant blocks of land out in Mullawa or Minginoo, or no, actually not so much Minginoo, but Kew and Meekatharra, and those sorts of places where a block of land might be worth $1,000. $1,000 or a couple of $1,000. And I remember saying to my wife at the time, I said, babe, even if we don't have the money at the time, let's just buy one on the credit card and stick the title in the bottom drawer, because one day it's probably going to be worth 5,000, 20,000, maybe 50,000. And I don't really know what those blocks of land are worth now, but where I really learn the most, I think, about how engrossed I am in my little real estate world, and therefore probably how engrossed you are in your little real estate world, is when I talk to other people about the different professions and vocations that they've got. And often I'm sitting there going, I'm intrigued, because I love learning about what other people do with their time, but I'm sitting there thinking often, wow, I didn't even know that was a job. I didn't know, because I don't stop to think about it. So we just live in our little real estate bubble, and hence this is why it is we love, doing things like this show. But there's a lot of the world that goes on outside of the real estate industry, which often sometimes I forget. But you mentioned also about what we mentioned last week, and straight away, often you'll see a story the following week, a little bit along the lines of what it is that we've said. And And two things come to mind with that. Last week, I mentioned the C word, and I'm not being disgusting or
Yes.
disrespectful, but I mentioned the C word, and obviously the C word for this year, without doubt, has been COVID. It has dominated play not only in WA, but it's dominated play around the world. But what was the C word, do you recall, that I said is going to have a major impact on the WA economy next year?
Well, it wasn't coal, but it's the same connection. One China.
Absolutely, and the reliance on China for the WA economy, not sole reliance, but we've got to be honest, it's a pretty major part. And so coal is something that we've seen obviously in tonight's news that apparently internally within China themselves, they are steering their consumers away from using WA coal. So that's the layman's version of what's going on. But ultimately, if we're not able to export coal to China, and I think we actually saw a coal vessel just sitting off the coast of China, and they're not accepting it, that's going to impact on trade. But it's not just coal. If we actually look down my little list that I have in front of me, beef. Beef is a major issue. The wine industry, we've heard a lot about that in the last 3 months. Barley, the farming industry of the Midwest, and the inability to be able to supply barley to China. Crayfishing industry, obviously major in the Midwest. As at today, you can get a fully cooked crayfish in Woolworths, circa 500 grams, for $20. That was unheard of 3 months ago. Absolutely unheard of. And as at today, you can get a cooked crayfish for $20 in Woolworths. And I reckon that price might come down as we edge towards Christmas. And now coal as well. And I really think that we'd be foolish to think that all these different items collectively is not going to have an impact on our WA real estate market next year. So that's the prediction, but I reckon it's probably a bit more than a prediction now. I reckon it's going to become a reality that if that's those export markets of ours, which are so important to our economy, if we're not able to export it as much, and therefore we haven't got those Chinese dollars coming into our economy, unless we find new markets for these things that we have to put the stops on so far as China's concerned. And it's not just that you don't just click your fingers and find new markets. It takes time and it takes money as well. The WA economy might not look as rosy as what it has done over the last 6 months.
It's interesting, though. It's interesting with regard to that. I agree with you. Totally agree with you. It's also interesting to note, though, in recent weeks, and in fact, even in the last week, you read the articles of what's going on in the East Coast. I know we focus on WA, but it's also interesting what's going on the East Coast with regard to the property market. So, all these expectations of huge drops in values, etc. It appears everyone's just moved on. And the minute Victoria came out of their lockdown, away she went. And it was a bit similar to what occurred with us here in WA. Similar has been going on in New South Wales. Queensland, as I said to you a week or two ago, Queensland and WA, what did I say? There was something like 1 million people are entertaining selling their property Australia-wide over the next year in this survey, a very extensive survey. And of those 1 million sales, there is quite a significant, now there's a large number of those, as I said, international investors, etc., who are getting out. But there's also a large percentage of people in New South Wales and Victoria who have identified Queensland and WA as the place to be. That's where they want to now move to. That's where they want to now live. That's where they now want to invest or buy. So that will have an impact, but it's interesting it'll be interesting as to what impact China will have on all that, not just in WA, but across the board.
Yeah, and the other thing being as well is not so much or not solely just as to the impact China will have on daily activity, or rather, the expectation for growth that I think we all have so far as the WA property market is concerned, but also the confidence and the sentiment of people, either the buyers or even the sellers, and where that, where that might go. And for the last 6 months, the story that I've reported so far as the stats and everything of what's been going on since COVID in terms of the number of properties that have been selling every week, which we know has been upward of 800 properties every single week. This last week, there was 926 sales in the Perth metropolitan area. So again, really, really strong numbers of sales. The stat on the ABC News tonight is that days on market have dropped down from 39 days in order to sell a house. 39 days, I think, 12 months ago. As at today, it's 22 days in order from the time that a for sale sign goes up on a house to the time that it goes under contract. So effectively, we're talking about 3 weeks. And I reckon that average that they're saying over there is probably blown out a little bit by the properties that just aren't selling because maybe their price is a bit too high. But I would think that that average could actually be a bit tighter, maybe somewhere between 15 and 20 days if those outliers at the top, or those ones that are taking a long, long time to sell, weren't actually included in that sample size. But so far as the rental market is concerned, so for the last 6 months, both the sales market and the rental market, we've been having very high volumes, and my story has been the same basically week in, week out. I think it's actually time for me to make a call and change my story so far as the rental game is concerned. Yeah, I think actually that we're having a bit of a slowdown in the rental activity that we've seen in the marketplace, and either one of three things. Either I'm wrong, and there is actually no slowdown, because for the last month or so, normally we lease between 800 and 1,000 properties in Perth every single week. But for the last week, that number has been somewhere between 700 and 800 properties. So there's been like a slight shift. And the main reason that I've seen for that is not because there's a slowdown in activity of there's not enough people to rent these properties. It's been very, very high activity, but there just haven't been that number of properties out there to actually rent. So because we know that our rental vacancy rate has been dropping and dropping and dropping. And so I think that the volume of transactions of weekly rentals has actually fallen only because the supply has been so small. But now we're actually approaching Christmas time, so maybe things are going to slow down a bit then. But I don't know. So this week, for the first time in 6 months, I've seen leasing rates fall to, well, numbers that I haven't really seen any time in the last 12 months. So in the last 7 days, there's been 637 properties leased. Now that figure is normally 900 to 1,000. For the last 4 weeks, it's been around 750 to 800 properties, because there hasn't been the supply. And this week it's down to 637 properties. Not only that, the supply of vacant properties is now back above 3,000. So for quite some time, it's been at 2,700, 2,800, and it dropped below that 3,000 mark. And for the first time in probably 6 weeks, it's now back up above the 3,000 mark. Only just, it's at 3,061. But I'm just wondering whether those stats are showing us that the rental market itself is starting to slow. Not that it's a slow rental market, but maybe it's slowing from the madness that we've seen in the last 3 or 4 months. I don't know.
Is that being offset with sales and purchases? So are we seeing a situation where low interest rates, therefore people saying, hang on, with rent being so high, is this an opportunity to buy? Because interest rates don't appear to be rising anytime soon. In fact, they're predicting a year or two. So it's affordable, and even if they rise, they're not going to go up by 10%. So it's still very, very affordable. So is it a situation where people are saying, maybe we're going through this mad race, we've got the ability to repay. If we've got the ability to pay that sort of money in rent, should we not entertain the opportunity to buy?
Absolutely, yeah, that very much could be a factor. I was in a property management meeting this morning at an office other than my own, and there are two vacates. Like the property, the office is basically fully leased in terms of all their rental properties, and there's a couple of vacancies that are coming up in January. And I asked the question of the property manager why. Both those people have actually bought properties, so yeah, those properties. The tenants are moving out to move into their own bought properties, and I think the owners of those rental properties might actually look at selling them because they've just had enough of holding on to them. The other stat that was on the news tonight on the ABC News was that in the last quarter, so in the October quarter, compared to the October quarter of 2019, first home buyer loans are up 147%.
Yep.
So massive interest from first home buyers. So long as they're able to fund a deposit and have that entry cost into home ownership, it is almost a no-brainer with money as cheap as it is and the other first home buyer incentives for them to be owning and getting their foot in the door in the real estate market instead of renting. It's a no-brainer.
Yep, yep. And it's interesting when you read there was an article in the West Australian in the real estate section on Saturday, and Damien Collins, the REWA president, he made a comment that renting a property in Perth is still cheaper than any other capital city in Australia. So as much as it's been increasing, we in the scheme of things, we're still relatively cheap in comparison. So it's what do you say? November, the data, only 2,889 properties available for rent, which is 52% less than November 2019, which is what you've been saying for a while. But as you said, it's now got above the 3,000, but only just. But he also made mention, due to the limited number of rentals available, it has created upward pressure on rents, which we've been saying for some time. And the Perth median weekly rent price increased $10 to $390 per week. And breaking it down into houses and units, the median house price is $400 per week, and the median unit price is $360 per week. So that's giving a bit of an idea.
And one of the other things, that the reason why Perth is still, one of the cheapest, if not the cheapest capital city, is because those other bigger capital cities like Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane, they are so much more densely populated right around the city centre area. And we all know as you go closer to the coast and as you go closer to the city, the rents go up. So only in the last 10 years, maybe 10 or 15 years, have we actually seen an increase in density of more apartments basically being built in and around the city centre. But other than that, everything exists out in suburbia, and we just don't have that density mass that those other big capital cities have. So I think naturally that would drag the average rental up in those capital cities, and hence Perth still looks pretty reasonably priced in comparison.
So we talk about the rental and we talk about the buying. What are some of the things that you're observing with your business and getting around to the real estate firms? Is there anything been of interest that's taken your fancy? You think, oh, hang on, that's interesting. You've noticed something different that perhaps hasn't been around the last 12 months or so.
Oh, no question. Investors are back. Absolutely no question. So probably middle of this year, there was a lot of investors who had just had enough and they were leaving the market. Interest rates were cheap, but not as cheap as what they are today. And ultimately, we've had a very challenging or trying real estate market for investors over the last 4 or 5 years, basically. So capital values have gone back. The rental market wasn't that flash, and interest rates were only slightly higher. But at the end of the day, if you're holding an investment property, even for the long term, if you've got 5 years of pain, and some people had longer than that, at some point in time, they might say enough is enough. That said, the rebound for our property market out of the COVID period, right now, we've still got very affordable real estate in Perth in comparison to the eastern states. Our rental market is as hot as ever, except in my comment that I made about 4 minutes ago. And money literally has never been cheaper, I think, basically any time in our lifetime as well. So it really does make for a very, very good investor market for people that are now looking at, for the next 5 years, if they want to have a very solid real estate investment, now's a really, really good time to buy. And certainly in talking to real estate agents at the current time period, and also mortgage brokers, by the way, investors are definitely back in the market because they can foresee what they've seen in the last 6 months. If they can repeat that over the next 2 or 3 years, it would make for a very worthwhile real estate investment. No question.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I've said to you the last week or two, clients that are contacting me, people from the East Coast, seeking my assistance with different things. And I'm not talking about Geraldton, I'm talking about WA, more particularly the metro area. But certainly there's been people that have inquiring and investing in the regional areas. And obviously I'm more familiar with the Geraldton Midwest region. But it is our intention in the new year to do around the grounds and see if we can, as we said the last couple of weeks, try and get in touch with a few of the agents around the traps and get a perspective of what's going on rather outside the city area. And I mean, there's been commentary both on the East Coast and in WA about the enthusiasm and interest in regional areas, and that doesn't appear to be any different here in WA. But it'd be good to get some of those people, some of those guys out there and up in the northwest and the Midwest. I've already spoken to Henry Van Thiel and get Henry back in to have a chat. But we'll see if we can't get down to the southwest and areas like that and just see what their observations are with and tell their story, what's going on rather than just the city. So we'll try and do that in the new year.
Yeah, mate, just touching on that, I have done my little regional analysis so far as the rental market is concerned. Look, don't get me wrong, the rental market's not doom and gloom. Far from it. I just try to, as you know, we try to keep our information up to date, and if we make any predictions based on what we're seeing, we like to make that call as well. And so far over the course of this year, we've kind of been proven right, I think. And all I'm saying is maybe there's a little bit of the heat coming out of the rental market so far as the activity is concerned. That might be because still there's very few properties. It might be because we're approaching Christmas, or in fact, I might be right and that ridiculous sting that we had in the market is just being suppressed a little bit. Looking at the rental market around the regions of WA, Geraldton sits at 67 properties available for rent. So if you're after a rental in Geraldton, it's still very, very tight. You only have 67 properties to choose from, which includes houses and units. So that's extremely tight. Margaret River, actually, see, there's another stat. Last week, there was no properties at all available in the Margaret River region. The week before, there was one property available in the Margaret River region. And as at today, there's 5. So, yeah, I don't, and look, we're not talking big numbers because next week it might be back to 0, but I just do pay a bit of attention to the current stats and try and work out if that's supporting a trend. So next week's show, which will probably be the last one for the year, I guess, if we're doing one. But next week's show, it'll be really interesting to see what the stats are. Busselton, 15 properties in Busso available for rent. Carnarvon, you've got no chance. There's 1 property available in the whole of Carnarvon.
Really?
So really, you do have 1 chance. Exmouth, 3 properties in the whole of Exmouth. If you need a rental, you've got 3 to choose from. And I even checked on Newman as well, and there's 28 properties available in Newman, and it's a highly mining accommodation demanded place. Newman is. I looked into Karratha, I looked into Port Hedland, and I looked into Newman. In fact, I also looked into Broome. But so far as the mining towns are concerned, there seems to be a number, like the rents are definitely going up there. There's no question, but there's a bit of a gap. There's a lot of properties that will sit between the 350 to 450 mark, and those are absolutely the lower end properties, the older properties, the 3x1s, and yeah, basically the stuff that wouldn't really be attracting the corporates and the mining companies that are moving into town so that their workers are close to the mine sites. But certainly the modern properties, the 3-bedroom, 3-bathroom, 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom type, 2-story places, often with a pool and a nice outdoor area. Those rents are certainly heading north, and they're getting paid, I guess, by companies that are making very good money in mining currently, so they can afford to pay more in rent. And the other thing being is that because they have to house their workers in there, they can't really go to their workers who they're trying to attract to the area to live out of home and live a FIFO lifestyle. They can't really offer them a $350 a week rental because that doesn't make for very good living conditions. So if they can offer them something more modern, air-conditioned pool and a bit flasher, then they're going to attract the workers that they need, and they can continue to do what they do so far as their mine is concerned. But regionally, there doesn't really look to be much of a let up in the rental market either.
Mate, can I just tell you, with these stats, it does concern me a little bit. You can see the way I'm sitting in my chair. I've become a little bit defensive because I've just got a comment. We've asked for questions, but I've just had a question. Well, not a question, a statement. Wow, 67. That's less than TV's age. I mean, seriously, this is a serious show. This is something we do to provide information. Is there any need for that, Justin Collins? I don't think so.
No, I don't think so. And speaking of your age, TV, there's a significant milestone that's just been passed over the weekend just gone, if I'm not mistaken, and it involves you and your lovely lady.
Yes. If people are wondering why I haven't got back to the last few days, I think she's been pretty amazing, my little princess, looking after me with my accident and all that. So it's been a pretty challenging 18 months. So we had a wedding anniversary. And we actually went to Mandurah. And it's interesting with regard to that, we were in Mandurah some 2 years ago, thereabouts. Again, I was in a recovery mode with another little, for a healthy bloke, I've had a pretty good run the last couple of years. But we were in Mandurah thanks to some lovely friends who allowed us to have some recovery time in their unit down there. And at that time, it was around about Easter, 2018 it was. And my comment was, I said, Jude, let's drive around and just see what happened, because the market was ordinary. And the place was thriving. The minute Easter Monday came along, everybody packed up their cars and off they went. And there was just the grey nomads and one TV and his lovely wife. And so we had a look around, and the number of properties around Mandurah, both around the cut and all that area, which were $1 million homes, right? We had for sale signs for $600,000 and $700,000, and there were properties near the foreshore down the northern end of Mandurah for sale. You know, go there now, and it's a totally different ballgame. Totally different.
Yeah.
And it was really intriguing with regard to that. But yeah, we did have a lovely time, and it was nice just to have some us time and a bit of relax. But yeah, 34 years. And we actually met in Mandurah. Thank you.
Sorry?
We met in Mandurah.
Yeah, exactly. And I asked you off air, did you go back to the place of meeting? Does it even exist anymore?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does exist. But no. There was no romance when we first met. In fact, it was just purely and simply through her brother, who I was worked with in the bank, at National Bank back in the day. I was down there doing a troubleshooting job, and there we go. So, and then things evolved over the next 2 or 3 years purely by chance more than anything. And I'm one very lucky man, mate. But anyway, enough about me, enough about us.
Mate, I think she's a lucky lady too. There's no question, mate. Any lady that gets to spend more than an hour with Tony Viner, far out, lucky lady.
Oi, she might think of me. Hey, listen, one of our regular guests and followers, one Dean Stonehouse, who was on last week from Stonehouse Finance. Hello, Dino, and we really appreciate him coming on board and contributing. Always willing, and he's been super busy, but he wants to catch up with the two of us too. He wants to. I don't know whether I think we've got to shout him for lunch at some point, so we'll have to do that. Sort that out. He wants to know what are the stats in Kalgoorlie. Have you got those?
No, but I can find, if you, TV, just have a bit of a chat with Dean right now, and I'll quickly jump on and I'll find out for you.
Oh, okay. And I've just got to, the other thing that I wanted to make mention of while you're doing that, we talk about properties, and I'm talking with a conveyancing hat on now, But one of the issues that's concerning me, and which has been my regular conversation with both clients and my office and my manager and my conveyancing staff, is time frames, which we've discussed before, but vacant possession. It's really, really important if you're doing a contract and it's your intention. We talk about rental properties and things of that nature. And of course, if people are in a home that they're renting and then the owners decide to sell, and you intend to buy that property, but you intend to buy it as your residence, it's imperative that contract is vacant possession, that you have a special condition on there that identifies that you are buying that property, and at settlement you want possession of that property. So you want not possession, but you want vacant possession. So you want the tenant out and you want to be taking over that property so you can reside. If you do not do that, and we've got a couple of scenarios that we are experiencing at the moment, then you've got a problem, because if there's a lease in place, and if the tenant decides he's going to hold their ground, and particularly at the moment where we've been talking about it for weeks on end, where it's very, very difficult to get a rental property, and let's say Geraldton, where there's only 67, and that 67 may not suit you. You may have a family of 5, and you can only get a 3-bedroom place or a 2-bedroom place. So there's a range of things that need to be considered, but we're experiencing, and I'm sure we're not the only ones, where it hasn't been properly identified in the contract. So if you're a buyer out there, if I can give you any advice at all, and you intend to buy the home to live in, then please ensure that you, one, liaise with the settlement agent, or you contact someone like myself that provides independent consulting, or you speak with a settlement agent, and you ensure that you make reference of that in your contract when you sign it. It's too late after the contract's done and dusted.
Yeah, mate, I totally agree. I'm going to come back to that in just a section, but in just a second, I'm going to come back to that. But in answer to Dean's question, there's 112 properties available in the entire Kalgoorlie-Boulder area. Now, I'm not overly familiar with the market over there. 112, given the size of the area, it's not a big number anyway, and there's quite a bit of low-priced stuff. So I don't know that Kalgoorlie-Boulder has got any different conditions to what we've got throughout the other parts of regional WA, but it just doesn't seem as tight as, say, a Busselton, or as tight as a Geraldton as well. But again, 112 properties. If there were 112 properties available in Geraldton, I'd still be saying it's a very tight market. 67 makes it all that tighter. TV, I came across the situation. We're talking about the way contracts are written. That extends to rental contracts as well. And I came across a situation today where there was an owner of a landlord of a property. This is in a different office. There was a landlord of a property that wanted to take possession at the beginning of, I think by the end of December, actually, wanted to take possession of their rental property, but there was a tenant in there through till March. Now, the landlord decided to make an attractive offer to the tenant and offer them basically a 4 weeks rent-free period, so a discount in their rent of 4 weeks if they terminated their lease early, and I think that had to be by the 17th of December in this particular example. And if they found another form of accommodation or another house, and there would be no early termination fees, obviously, but there'd also be an incentive of 4 weeks rent free for this particular tenant if they accommodated the fact that the owner wanted their property back so that they could move into it. So the property manager put that deal together and put everything in writing. And this happened, obviously, I don't know, 6 or 7 weeks ago, maybe 2 months ago. And then the tenant went about trying to find themselves their next accommodation, which eventually they did. But as it turns out, they can't vacate this house by the 17th of December. They can only move into their new house by the 20th of January or something like that. But that's still well before their lease was meant to expire. So I was discussing this with the property manager this morning, and the property like this situation's now come to a head, and they think that the landlord was being unreasonable in saying, well, now you don't get the 4 weeks rent because I'm not able to achieve my goal. and the property manager's saying, but yeah, look, the tenant tried, and he's getting out of his lease early to try and help out. He's tried his best. He just couldn't find another property till the 20th of January. And she was thinking that the tenant's in the right and that 4 weeks incentive should be honoured. But going back to the way that this term in the contract was written, that wasn't the agreement. The agreement wasn't try and find an alternative accommodation and the 20th of January will do. The terms of the contract was, if you vacate by the 17th of December, we will discount your rent by that 4 weeks. And even though they found a new place to move into on the 20th of January, they haven't met the conditions of the contract. So therefore, it is, why would they then get the benefit of the 4 weeks rent? The way that the story finishes, I don't know, but we've suggested that they can meet halfway. The tenant tried to do the right thing. The owner still hasn't got possession of their place. Maybe there's a 2-week rent-free period or something like that. But the owner would be absolutely within their rights to go back and say, no, you didn't comply with the condition as it was written. I know what you've tried to do, but I'm sorry you haven't complied. So therefore, I don't need to comply with my side either. So it goes beyond sale contracts. It exists in rental contracts as well, and they're all contracts. So the way that they're worded and structured is super, super important.
Yep, very much so. And the same with regard to the offer and acceptances, what you do and how you do that. And if you're uncertain, and even if the real estate agent's not sure, you're not quite sure, you want a second opinion. I mean, we're not suggesting the real estate agent is getting it all wrong, but sometimes it helps to get a second opinion, have an independent point of view before you sign it off. Because when it gets to the settlement agent, and at the moment, I can tell you, excuse me, I can tell you now, the real estate fraternity is busy, but you can imagine how busy the finance brokers and the settlement agents are. And I certainly know that the amount of extra time that my manager and my staff are doing. And we're certainly not the biggest settlement agent in WA, far from it. Been around a long time, but we're certainly busy bees, and it's certainly an interesting situation at the moment. But if you get these contracts wrong, and if you don't consider timeframes and you don't consider all the things and put it in writing, you've got to remember, I suppose the way to put it is, we're not mind readers. And if you've had a discussion with someone and you made a verbal arrangement, when we get the contract, we can only rely, when I say we, I'm talking about the settlement agent. I'm talking about the conveyancer here in WA, or a lawyer. Some lawyers do conveyancing. So whoever it may be, whoever's doing your conveyancing for the transfer of that property, if it's not in writing, and then you come to us later on and say, oh no, we wanted this, this and this. If the seller and or the buyer turn around and say, oh no, sorry, that's not, we've disagreed. But hang on, you agreed on that. Well, you might have agreed, but it's not in writing. And that's why I keep on, we get it all the time. And the amount of heartache and anxiety, and of course, this time of the year, it's always busy at the best of times, because people sort of go, oh, hang on, it's Christmas, let's try and get in before Christmas. If you haven't got your settlement arranged, you haven't got all your ducks in line now, is very, very unlikely your settlement to occur before next week.
And even, sorry, mate, I'll let you finish before I cut you off. Just another situation that I came across today as well, so far as the importance of condition writing and contract writing, even in the rental game. Another situation I came across today was, obviously at the very commencement of the COVID period, a lot of tenants who were losing jobs or whatever negotiated either a rental discount or a rental deferment, but ultimately a drop initially in the rent that they were paying to a level that was more affordable, and that would be for a set period of time. Now, this situation that I came across today is that in writing, it was agreed via the property manager, it was agreed between the landlord and the tenant that the rent would drop from $630 a week down to $500 per week. So it's a pretty big drop of $130 per week. That would happen for a period of 3 months. As we approach the end of that 3 months, there was a further agreement to extend that original 3 months for a further 3 months after that. But what was that documented? It doesn't look like it was. It was just one of those things when people are busy, in haste, they have a conversation, talk to the landlord. Yep, tenant says, yep, happy days, no worries. And it only becomes a problem when it becomes a problem, which is now, because it wasn't documented. The first 3 months passed. The second 3 months apparently was agreed, verbally was agreed. We're now past the end of that entire 6 months. And no one's actually made any change to the existing rental arrangement with the tenant. So still to this day, 2.5 months after the expiry of the 6 months, the tenant's still paying down at that $500 a week mark, when in fact, at the very least, should have been paying back to their $630 a week, and maybe should have actually been paying that, 4 or 5 months ago. But it's created a real mess with insufficient documentation to work out what should have happened, and it's just another classic example. My point being is that it doesn't only exist in the sale contract world; it very much exists in the rental contract world as well. And as usual, it only matters when it matters.
As I got on the point here, there would not be a day where I have a conversation, whether it be with my staff or whether it be with clients or whether it be a finance broker, or people ring me for an opinion or advice. My comment is one non-stop: be aware of the what if. Even if you think it's all rosy and it's all good and look, I trust him to the hilt. All I'm getting at is if you put it in writing, you're catering for the what if. And the what if I mean is, what if it doesn't go as planned? What if the things do change? What if the rental arrangements is what, you know what I mean? We've got to cater for the what if. So, I respect, and I'm always in trouble by my wife because I trust everybody, always have. The leopard can't change his spots, as I say. But the fact being is, one thing I've learned with regard to business, and certainly in our profession, being involved in finance and in property over the years, you've got to put it in writing. You've got to confirm what's going on in writing. And you both sign it and confirm it. There it is. There's the agreement. It's a legal thing then. It's binding. It's not he said, she said, we said. And I don't care whether you're renting a property, whether it's an agreement between the landlord or the tenant or the property manager, or it's the real estate agent, the conveyancer and the buyer and the seller. Confirm it all in writing. Make sure, demand it in writing. If someone says, no, you don't need to worry about that, demand that in writing. Demand that you want that confirmed in writing.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. I don't want to reiterate everything that you said, but we do come across situations day in, day out that if there was, I was just thinking back to the day of, well, it wasn't that long ago, but so far as a sale contract, and it was a regular thing that a buyer would want to get a building structural report done. But the old clause used to be written back in the day: this offer is subject to the buyer obtaining a building structural report at the buyer's cost. And that was the condition. These days, real estate agents obviously have got most of the time should have a legally written clause that just forms the standard annexure to their contract of sale. But that's not the way it used to be. And so if you just have a condition that says the buyer has this right to go ahead and get their own building report at their own cost, and that's the end of the condition, what happens if the building report comes back and it's got termites, or it's about to fall down, or there's some major structural defects? If the clause doesn't actually point out what happens if, which is exactly what you just said, TV, then you've kind of got nowhere to go. But the way that the clause is written today versus the way it was, I don't know, 15 years ago, maybe it was only 10 years ago.
5 years.
Yeah, really? Well, the intent behind it is exactly the same, but now we just have to say, and if this happens, this is where you go. If that happens, this is what you need to do. And if that doesn't happen, and it just needs to be a lot clearer, because that said, I'm pretty sure that I've seen a contract sometime in the last 6 months that just says this contract is subject to the buyer obtaining their own structural report. I promise you I've seen that.
I'm telling you I've seen it.
Yeah.
Telling you, and I sit here day in, day out, and I go, please, please, please. Anyway, we'll look on a positive. Hey, look, one question that I want to raise, we go back to the rental, and I know we're going to do short and sweet tonight, but short-term rental, what impact is the rental market having on the short term? So I'm talking about the holiday makers, etc. And I say that because we talk about the Exmouths where, there's minimal rentals available there. We talk about Margaret River, minimal rentals down there. What about the short-term rental market? Is this issue having an impact on the short-term market, the holiday-type market, Airbnb?
Well, no? It's not my market, mate, so I won't get into any nitty-gritty.
Sure.
And I know that there was a bit of a change in legislation so far as Airbnbs and the short-term, or rather the holiday rental market is concerned. I know that obviously at the time that COVID happened, and I was working with a business at the time, that their main business was all about short-term serviced accommodation, or rather furnished accommodation. And their business, it was like a bomb hit it, because all those business travelers that would come in and out for 4 days, 5 days, 2 days, or whatever, and it made for a very good investment for the property owners. They do really, really well out of it. But if you were holding a business that did that, it was an absolute bomb site at the time that travel restrictions came in as well. From that time forward, because of the travel restrictions, I know that a lot of those short-term rentals did convert to the permanent residential market, because the permanent residential market bounced out of COVID so well. And obviously with travel restrictions, the short-term market couldn't do that, because there simply weren't the people to fill them. So I do know that a lot of people changed their short-term rentals to long-term rentals, like a normal 12-month lease scenario. Whether that will actually change back now, I don't know. It's not my market. I don't deal in that. I only really deal in the permanent stuff. So that'd be a good one actually to have in terms of a guest. And I know a couple of people in that space. So yeah, having a guest to talk about the short-term rental market, I reckon would be a great idea.
Yep. All right. And the other thing about good ideas, Justin Collins, from Aviso Insurance, so just has been a guest on our show, and we're going to get him again in the new year. He just said, hey guys, perhaps you could do a whole episode on areas to consider in a purchase of contract. Some of the issues from his perspective, being insurance, is electrical wiring, building survey, asbestos, heritage listing, bushfire areas, and lots more. So he's given us some openings there that we are going to get JC on after Christmas, and discuss another perspective with regard to insurances. So we had a huge, JC on last, and we had a huge number of people that watched that and got quite involved with questions. So we'll make sure we get JC on again with regard to some insurance stuff.
And so a really, really good topic that I'd love to learn from JC about as well is contamination, or they call it property contamination. But what I'm actually talking about is drug use in properties or rental properties. It's a real big issue. And how, what are the requirements from an insurance point of view so far as drug testing or contamination testing? And I'm sure he's got a couple of case studies that, there might have been properties that they had tested and therefore decided that they can't insure. So that'll be a great episode.
That's probably something we should discuss too with regard to a special condition, because you rarely see that in a contract, when a buying and selling contract. And I've been around for a long time, and I can't say that I've seen anything like that in a contract. It's probably more of a
over the course of the last 12 months, maybe the last couple of years. But no, the last 12 months, when this has really become an issue so far as drugs in use in society and therefore in houses in rental accommodation, there was certainly some sort of a movement, particularly from the mortgagee's point of view. So when the banks get involved, and if the banks were going to be lending money against a property, there was talk that the banks were going to require a professional test done to confirm whether there was any contaminating activity in the house structure itself. Because if there is, and I'm sure there are properties out there, if there is any contamination activity related to drug use or drug labs, that sort of stuff, that can be an extremely costly exercise to remediate. And ultimately, it can impact on the value of the property, so far as I've heard of a situation where a property was that badly contaminated that it actually had to be demolished. So the house itself had to be demolished. And if
really?
Yeah, I've heard that. I don't know if it actually happened, but I know that a mortgagee would not get involved because the report came back so bad, and that canned the deal. The mortgagee was not prepared to lend the money on that property because it actually had to be demolished. So there's the value of the land, there's the value of the improvements on the land or the house. And if you have to knock over a house and rebuild that, well, what's the value of the property that you're buying? Surely it's only the land at best. So it's an awesome topic.
That's something we do a bit of research. If we can't get someone involved for next year, we'll have a show next week, but we won't be doing that next week. But certainly something we can follow up for and see if we can do a bit of homework on that. be an interesting topic, and maybe JC will be a part of that.
Yeah, hope so.
Hey, listen, the other quick question, there is a really interesting article. Michael Valletta, is that the Michael Valletta that used to play cricket for Australia?
It sure is.
Very, very handy. Very, very handy. He wrote a very interesting article about the Perth property market finally in recovery. But I'll raise that next week because we're fast running out of time, and I didn't want to go. But he wrote a very, very interesting article a week or two ago about the market and is it swinging back in the favour of the West. But he also put another spin on it as well. So I think it's worth commentating.
Listen to you, mate. You're dropping in all the puns. Yes, it is Michael Valletta, and he's the director of one of the valuation firms in town. And you're talking about the property market might be starting to swing again, and Michael Valletta might put a bit of a spin on it. Are those intended puns, or was that just a coincidence?
Oh, just mate, just a coincidence.
No, seriously. No, well, it didn't sound like a coincidence to me.
Oh, you just got to think on your feet sometimes. You know what I mean? Hey, well, you talked about very quickly. You talked about celebrations. It's one of our mates who I've been trying to get on our show.
Yes.
This is episode 34. Jody Bevan, manager of Bendigo Bank in Community Bank in Geraldton. Happy birthday, mate. He's probably not even watching us. He's probably being spoiled by his girls, but we wish him a happy birthday.
He's watching us. He's probably saying, Lana, go away, Lana. I'm busy watching Property Avenue WA. That's what he's saying.
I'm sure he'll watch it tomorrow, I'm sure, but I hope he has a great day and catch up with him for a beer. Hey, so we're definitely going to have a show next week. So for those that want to know what's going on, if you are following us, yes, we're definitely having a show. There's been a couple of comments. I'm going to try and look at this. Justin Collins reckons I've just hit it for 6. And so look, everybody knows Mike Valletta. He's a lovely guy, well respected in the value world from Dean Stonehouse. Oh, please.
He is, mate. He's a really, really. He's just a nice guy.
He always came across a gentleman on the cricket field. I reckon he came across as one of those Mr. Nice guys.
Yeah.
Hey, anyway, Christmas next week. We're only 10 days away. Looking forward to that, but we're definitely having a show next Tuesday. You happy with that idea?
Yeah, sounds great, mate. We can make it a bit of a Christmassy theme, of course.
I think so. That's the plan. But we're also definitely pursuing the next year having a podcast. So you don't have to. We both don't. Be assured. Neither of us agree. Well, Oscar may think so, but I wouldn't suggest that we have a face for TV or video. But so we're really keen about the podcast, which allows you. Yes, I'm with you. Allows you to listen rather than having to watch, and you can listen anytime you like. So we'll keep you informed about that. We'll have a break between the Christmas New Year period is the plan, and then we will back on track. We'll keep you in the loop as to when we're officially going to come back. We might just have a week break. We might have 2 weeks. New Year's Day is on, other than being on the 1st. We might be able to have one. We'll see. We'll let you know. I've got a NIF question.
Hit me.
If when you think about the Christmas, if you sort of go back in time and sort of think about your favourite memories, what would that favourite memory be that still sticks around to this day, and why is it such a special memory?
That's a really, really good question, mate. Only because I think it's hard to pinpoint just one. I would say that Christmas for me each year just gets better and better and better because I'm a dad now, and my 2 girls who are 11 and almost 9. I get more excited, I think, than they do, just because I love seeing them getting excited. So it's a great time of the year. But if I had to pick one of them, I'd probably pick a Christmas around when I was about 8 or 9 years old, and we've got relatives in the US, in San Francisco, and Dad and Mum took us over there for a family trip with our cousins in San Francisco, and it was snowing, and we had a Christmas like every single. Actually, hang on, I don't think it snowed in. I did. It snowed. It was snowed in San Francisco, it was just a really, really gorgeous time. It was just the whole white Christmas thing.
Yep.
And it was the first time that I had seen snow, and it was just a magic time to spend with our cousins on the other side of the world. So, what about you?
Well, I came up with this because similar to you, I'm lucky enough that I now have grandchildren as well, which is fabulous and very exciting. But I always remember as a young kid, and it's been a memory to this day, because we used to drive up. Dad moved to Geraldton when he was a young lad in the bank. Met Mum, and of course that's where we lived, and that's where we were brought up. But we had a little car, and we would jump in there. And of course, in those days, you went the long way via Marchagee and through there and up the Bindoon Hill, the great big Bindoon Hill. And of course, when you got to the Bindoon Hill, quite often the radiator, some people might not understand what a radiator was, but you'd have to sit there for a while, and Dad would lift the bonnet and let the engine cool. And then we always got excited because you felt like you were getting there. And my grandmother, Dad's mum, lived in Dalkeith. And so we'd get into town down the Great Eastern Highway, and you'd hit there. And of course, the great thing was you'd see all the lights and the Christmas tree and whatever on the old Swan Brewery on the river there.
Oh, yeah.
All the lights, and I always remember that. It was great excitement. And then you'd drive around Mounts Bay Road and then round through Crawley. And my grandmother lived in Phillip Road in Dalkeith. And you'd get around there, and in those days, not a lot of people did it, but my grandmother had lights. And then you get there, and she was just so excited to see us. And of course, she'd make jam tins full of lollies, and they were made into snowmen, and all this excitement that they would make, because my grandmother came from the war days, and of course they made a lot of their stuff. They made their Christmas pudding, and you had threepences in them. So those memories still stuck to me, and I think that's probably why I enjoy Christmas so much. So hence the question. And I always, I'm a big Christmas buff, and like you, it's an exciting time. I love it for the kids and all the other things that go with it.
Mate, I didn't know that you had an affiliation with Phillip Road in Dalkeith, because the next parallel street over, which is Watkins Road, is
That's
where
right.
my mum and dad and our family home has been for the last 30 years, and Mum only sold it last year. Yeah,
Really?
end of last year, yeah, 12 months ago. So, and that's, like 150 metres away from Phillip Road and parallel too. So there you go.
Very
I knew we were related.
And I used to go to the church, the Catholic church just around the corner there with my mum.
The Carmelite Monastery?
Pardon?
The Carmelite Monastery.
That's right, exactly. And the nuns would sit there behind the thing, and that was our thing. Yeah, so we'd go there with Mum and my two brothers for midnight mass, and it was a big deal. It was pretty special time. They're great memories.
Yeah, well, mate, I'm glad that we said that it's going to be a shorter show today, and it's just clicked over 58 minutes. So,
yeah, mate, got to go. Been fantastic. To all those that have been watching and listening, thank you for being a part. JC and Dino, thanks for sending us your questions and making your statements, rude and otherwise. And mate, always a pleasure. Look forward to doing it next week. And we might have some exciting news to let people know over the next week or two. But Christmas, we'll do a Christmas show next week for sure. So thanks for everybody, and let me find our little banner. We might have a Christmas tune next week. Take care. Have a good week and stay safe.